This is a question worth 8 marks. Let's begin by reading the requirement first to understand the task at hand. Because once we know what is needed, we can confidently tackle the scenario. And by the way, never hesitate to change your approach and tackle the most manageable and easy parts first. So, if I want to attempt issue number 4 first, because it is coming across as an easy and friendly task, then I will definitely do it in a heartbeat. And when you come across a particularly challenging issue, do not let it hold you back. This is a trap set by your examiner. By all means, feel free to leave that problem for later. Believe in yourself, embrace your weaknesses, and push forward by capitalizing on your strength. It is important to note that examiner always leave a bit of a headroom when writing exam papers. In other words, if a question is worth 8 marks, there will actually be more than 8 marks up for grabs. So it is important to leave troublesome figures and get the easy marks first. The goal here is to earn more than 4 marks quickly by first attempting easy parts of the question. Allow me to share my 3-step process. I call it CIC, for rectifying errors. By following this process, you will be able to focus on one task at a time. Trust me, this approach will enable you to achieve boss-level mastery. And the best part is that you will get to see it in action. So hold tight, as they say, seeing is believing. Let's begin with step number 1, where you will be putting on your expert accountant hat and channeling your inner genius. Imagine yourself as the go-to accounting expert and ask yourself, what would the ideal entry look like? If you had been there, you would have nailed it by presenting the correct double entries without any partial or incorrect entries. It's pure accounting brilliance at step number 1. In this first step, write down the correct double entries. Don't worry, there's no need to make any correction at this stage. You would only need basic knowledge of double entry bookkeeping. Moving on to step number 2. It's time to forget about step number 1 for now, because now you are in step number 2. In this step, you will play the role of a detective. Metaphorically speaking, take a picture of the accountant's work and write down the entries per the question. Think of yourself as Sherlock Holmes and attempt to record what has already been done, despite the presence of mistakes. However, at this stage, let's not jump to any conclusions just yet. It's essential to keep your knowledge to yourself at this point. As we're still in step 2, it is essential to remember this golden rule. In double entry bookkeeping, always assume that silence speaks accuracy. If one side is omitted, let it be assumed it has been recorded correctly. Applying this golden rule in your exams can help you earn more marks in less time and avoid the unnecessary stress that comes with pesky rectification questions. So please remember to apply this rule as you move forward in this process. But let's be clear, these rules won't be applicable in practical life, of course. While auditing, you won't extend this kind of courtesy towards your client. In fact, you can expect all kind of disasters if you're not professionally skeptical towards your client. So be careful in your practical life. We have now reached the final step of the process. At this stage, stage number 3, you will compare step number 1, which has the correct entries, with step number 2, which has the incorrect entry. This comparison will help you eliminate the wrong entries and bringing in the correct ones. If you do this step correctly, your debits and credits would be equal and you will have successfully rectified the errors. And there you have it. Follow the CIC steps and voila, you will see the magic in action. It's almost like a magic trick. Except instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, you will be pulling accurate accounting records out of a mess of incorrect entries. Just remember to channel your inner accounting wizard. Step number 1, and your inner detective, step number 2, and you will be well on your way to mastering this process. Let's begin the question. Let's start by reading through the requirement of this question. To pass, you will need to secure at least 4 marks. And the good news is that accounting questions usually have a bit of a headroom, as I was talking about this earlier. You can even get nearly half of the issues wrong and still come out with a passing grade. Now, the big question is, should you be attempting both parts of the questions at once, or should you tackle them separately, A first and B later? I recommend going for both parts at once, hitting 2 birds with 1 stone and marking. I recommend going for both parts at once, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, as they say, and making your life a whole lot easier. But of course, I'm open to your perspectives and suggestions. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comment section below. Just remember that you only have about 14 minutes to knock this one out of the park, so let's get cracking. This is your suspense account. Suspense account should look like this, and I'll also make a draft profit and loss account. It's a good idea to get organized. After reading the requirements and drafting the necessity accounts and working, I will read additional information. Let's take a closer look at the additional information. As per part 1, it seems that we will end up with a balance in the suspense account. This will represent a loss from embezzlement. Now, when it comes to losses and expenses, they show up on the debit side of the profit and loss account. With this in mind, we can make an educated guess that the balancing figure will appear on the credit side of the suspense account, i.e., we will debit profit and loss account and credit the suspense account. But we don't know the exact figure yet. Now, here is a little trick. You can use your own figure rule to come up with any number. Let's be practical. It's highly unlikely that you will hit the exact figure in the exam when you are under huge time pressure. As long as your wrong number shows up in the right place on the profit and loss account, you will still earn half a mark. So go ahead and give it a shot. Get the position of the balancing figure right. Please note, I'm not taking advantage of that own figure rule at this point in time. Similarly, set the loss in the pro forma in the right way. If you use the own figure rule, it doesn't matter here, as long as you're showing that wrong number as an expense, as a deduction, you will get half a mark here. Let's start at the beginning and take our time to read through the question carefully. Let's zoom in. Do not skim over anything. Think about the implications for both the suspense account and the draft profit and loss as per the requirement of the question. The year end is 31st of December, and from this point onwards, as a good habit, I will compare any subsequent dates that I might see in the question to this. The examiner frequently criticizes students for their inability to correctly calculate depreciation charge, income or expenses in proportions. And guess what? The primary reason is the failure to compare dates with the year end. So please remember this good habit. The shortage of 215 is on the debit side of the trial balance, and therefore I will post it on the debit side of the suspense account. Similarly, I will update the draft profit and loss account as well with this figure given. Just by putting 215 in the right place, congratulations, you have earned half a mark. From this point onwards, the red color represent the current working, while the grey color would represent the previous work. I'm doing this so that you focus only on the current workings and see how the question builds on its own, surely and gradually. Give yourself another half a mark by starting the draft profit and loss account with 1431. Breathe in, breathe out, slow down your reading speed, read and think about one thing at a time. Let's meet our first problem. In every question, the answer lies within. This is something I truly believe in. Doesn't matter which paper you are preparing for. The key to unlocking this knowledge is to read carefully, for the explanation is already written in the question. But you might wonder how. Let me demonstrate this to you, my friends. Let's zoom in and focus on the details. First, it is important to understand the terminology. Return outwards refer to when we return purchased goods that we no longer want. This means that purchases should be reduced by crediting the purchase account and debiting the payables, as you won't pay for the returned goods. And therefore, you want to decrease the liability as a result. Now, since purchases are included in the cost of sales, this reduction also affects the profits. Therefore, my friends, we can safely assert that a decrease in the cost of sales would result in an increase in profits. Does this logic make any sense to you? On the other hand, return inwards refers to when customer return goods to us. This means that our sales would be reduced, resulting in a decrease in profits. Now that we have a better understanding, hopefully, of the concept at play, let's take a closer look at the three-step process. And before we apply the three-step process, let's remind us the golden rule. You have to be careful about this. So let's apply the three-step process approach and examine the question in greater detail. In every rectification question, two things will always be present: the nature of the transaction and the actual entry, which would be wrong. To distinguish between the two, I will use green color to represent the nature of the transaction and blue for the existing entry. Let's get started. The correct entry is to reduce purchases by crediting the purchases account, and because goods have been returned, as we were talking about a while ago, you will pay less to the supplier, so reduce your payables by debiting the payables account. Based on basic knowledge, this is how your correct entry should appear. Now let's turn to the incorrect entry, the one written in blue, and without using our knowledge, we are copying whatsoever the question is telling us. Remember not to pass any judgment. Keep your double entry bookkeeping knowledge to yourself and note down what they have done. It says that the return inwards have been debited, so I will debit the return inwards. Remember the golden rule? Silence speak accuracy. So if one side of the entry is omitted, let it be assumed it has been recorded correctly. Therefore, I will assume that because the question is keeping quiet about the payables, I will assume that payables have been debited correctly, and therefore I will debit payables. As a result of the two debits and no corresponding credit, the trial balance is bound to be imbalanced. Therefore, I will credit suspense account, just to balance the trial balance. Moving on to the rectification stage now. The aim is to remove the incorrect entry per step 2 and bring in the correct entry per step 1. At this point, you can relax and compare step 1 with step 2. Since the payables have already been debited quite rightly in the incorrect box, leave that entry unchanged, i.e. don't do anything. However, the purchase have not been credited in the incorrect box, i.e. step 2, so credit the purchase account now. Let's see what's wrong in step 2. The first incorrect entry is debit, return inwards, which should be cancelled out by posting the opposite entry, i.e. credit return inwards. And finally, the suspense account should be cleared by debiting it. Step 1 and 2 are no longer relevant to us. In exam, marks are only given for step 3, which involves replacing the wrong entry with the correct entry by comparing the entries from step 1 and step 2. In the context of the question requirements, step 3 means crediting return inwards to decrease the sales return and increase sales. This increase in sales will lead to higher profits. Similarly, crediting purchases will decrease cost of sales and also increase profits. Altogether, this correction would result in an increase in profit of 36,000. By posting 36,000 on the debit side, well done, you have now earned 0.5 marks. And by posting 36,000 as an increase in the profits, you have earned another 0.5 marks. In total, you have earned 2 marks. Task 1 done. You are 3 marks away from happiness and victory. So let's carry on and repeat the same process. Moving on to the second entry. We first need to talk about the sales ledger to understand what it is. The sales ledger lists all the sales a business has made. It helps the business track how much money its customers still need to pay. The sales ledger has detail about each sales, such as the date, the amount of money, and who the customer is or their account number. The sale ledger is also known by several other names, such as you can see them on the screen. So let's focus on step 1. They made a sale and therefore I would credit sale. There's no reference to cash sale, so I can safely assume it's credit sale, in which case the receivables are going up and therefore I will debit receivables. Now, let's focus on what the accountant has done and without passing any judgment, record his work. It says that invoice was posted twice to the sales ledger, i.e. receivables, so I would also debit twice the receivables. Again, there is no reference to the sales account, so I'll assume that the entry to the sales account has been made correctly. Do you remember that rule about the silence? So let's credit the sales account. You'll notice that credit side is short and I can't think of any account, so it must be a suspense account. Moving swiftly to step 3. We compare correct and incorrect entries. I have debited receivables with 42,000 and I can see the same in the incorrect box, so it's okay. And I don't have to do anything in here. However, I can also see another debit in the incorrect box for 42,000, which means I must reverse this by crediting receivables. Next is the credit to sales account. Again, the same as in the incorrect box, so don't do anything in here. However, I can see the suspense account in the incorrect box, which needs to be reversed by debiting the suspense account. Crediting receivables won't affect our draft profit and loss account. However, we need to update the suspense account. So let's do it. You will get 1 solid mark for correcting this mistake. Posting 42,000 on the debit side will earn you 0.5 marks here, so well done. We are getting closer to our destination bit by bit. Moving on to issue number 3. There are 2 issues here due to this mistake, and we need to fix both of them. One issue is the depreciation charge for the current year, and another one is correcting the error of brought forward accumulated depreciation. First, accumulated depreciation is overstated by £180,000. Let me tackle the depreciation issue first and start with the hypothetical cost figure of 1 million for the machinery. To illustrate the issue, you may assume another figure such as 2 million, 3 million. It really doesn't matter. If everything had been done correctly, I would have deducted the correct amount for the accumulated depreciation of 461 and thus charge 15% on the reduced balance. This would result in a depreciation charge of 80,850. Now, using the exact hypothetical figure of 1 million, I would deduct 641 this time as per the question and run the numbers for the depreciation charge. And I hope you would agree with me that that would turn out to be 53,850. Now pause for a moment and think about what's going on. You really have to take your time, breathe in, breathe out, and think, do you agree that the accountant has charged less depreciation? If you were there, we would have charged 80,850, not 53,850. And therefore, we need to set an extra depreciation of £27,000 in the draft profit and loss account. You will get the same 27,000 figure if you multiply 15% to that overstated amount of £180,000. To illustrate the consequences of overstating the accumulated depreciation, I used a hypothetical amount of 1 million. A larger accumulated depreciation leads to a greater deduction from the cost of an asset. This results in a smaller depreciation charge. I trust that this concept is now clear and we can proceed with the adjustments. You will get 1 solid mark for this. This should give you 0.5 mark when you put £27,000 as a deduction in the draft profit and loss account. We are nearing the finish line and I can sense the potential of our success even from afar. It's great. Let's also correct the mistake due to the wrong brought forward. By the way, I have made a video on how the T accounts of depreciation expense and the accumulated depreciation account work. Watching that by clicking the link on the right hand side will be useful if you're not too sure about the double entry bookkeeping. The difference here is £180,000. So think about deducting £180,000 from 641 because you want to correct that mistake. Do you agree that I should put 180 on the debit side? Because that is the only way to reduce the 641. In other words, I'm suggesting to debit the accumulated depreciation account with £180,000. Just using common sense, I can't put it on the credit side as it will increase the already overstated brought forward figure of 641. And if you agree with this, I hope you would also agree with me on the other leg of the entry, which is to credit the suspense account. This will be worth 1 mark. So let's update that. We have 3 items in here and we should attempt them one at a time, starting with the rent receipt, which is an income. Let's begin with the correct entries first. The question states that everything required has already been entered into the cash book, but the other accounts have yet to be completed. We are preparing accounts for the year ended 31st of December 2021, and we have received the rent until 31st of March 2022, which is suggesting that we have received this rent in advance. I'll debit the cash for the whole amount because that is what we have received. As there's no doubt about it, that is the fact, that's what we have received, and this is what we are going to record. For this period, the rental income should be credited for the 9 months only, from 1st of April 2021 to the end of the year. We have earned 9 months worth of rental income, and we should proudly include them in the profit and loss account. No problem with that. For the other 3 months, no services have been provided yet. In other words, this is more like a liability for the business. We have received the cash, but since the services have yet to be delivered, I will credit the deferred income for 84,000. Turning to the incorrect entries now. The question states that cash has already been recorded, so I will debit the cash. Since the accountant has entered neither income nor deferred income, I will credit the suspense account. Moving on to the correction. Pause the video and think about how you will execute the correction. Here, you should do the standard stuff, compare step 1 with step 2, eliminating and replacing the incorrect entries with the correct ones. If the entries in step 1 and step 2 are the same, then no further action is required. Does your answer look similar to mine? If not, why not? If it does, then congratulations, we are getting the hang of rectifying errors. I'm crediting the income and deferred income because it is the right way to record it, and reverse the suspense account by debiting it. Let me know how you did it in the comment section below. Let's suppose the figure on the debit side per hour work, which is worth 0.5 mark. Let's suppose 336 on the debit side per hour work, which is worth 0.5 mark. And if you put the correct figure of 252, then it's worth 0.5 mark as well. Congratulations, you have now officially passed the question by scoring 6 out of 8 marks. Let's discuss the next issue, which is related to equipment purchase. There are 2 problems here, namely the purchase of equipment and its depreciation. Let's begin with the purchase. The correct entry would be to debit the equipment and credit the cash account. Let's take a quick break from the video and have some fun with step 2 and step 3. Give them a shot on your own and then come back to see how you did compare to mine. Don't worry, if you don't get it right, we will work through it together. Let's take a quick break from the video and have some fun with step 2 and step 3. Give them a shot on your own and then come back to see how you did compare to mine. Don't worry if you don't get it right. We will work through it together. Remember, practice makes perfect, so let's get cracking. The incorrect step will have credit cash per question, explicitly mentioning that it was treated correctly. However, it seems like the accountant has debited the suspense account instead of equipment account. The correction step will do the right thing by debiting the equipment account and reversing the suspense account. If your answer differs from mine, take a moment to think about what went wrong. Following a step-by-step approach is crucial to avoid any mistakes. The correction entry will be worth 1 solid mark. And I'll update my suspense account. Let's deal with the depreciation expense for the year. Because the equipment was bought on 1st of May, I will charge a depreciation expense of 22,000. I will debit the depreciation expense account and credit the accumulated depreciation account. Debiting depreciation expense will obviously reduce my draft profit figure, like this. Once again, this will give me 0.5 marks. Job well done. You have now scored 7.5 out of 8 marks. Now let's see the last issue, starting with step 1. Now, because you have seen me how I approach, please pause and have a go and see if your answer matches mine. All right, let me break it down for you in simple terms. So, for the first step, we will debit purchase and credit cash. Easy peasy, right? Now, in step 2, the question specifically tells us to credit cash. Now, in step 2, the question specifically tells us to credit cash, but it looks like the other half of the entry is missing. No worries though, we will just debit a suspense account to balance things out. To correct everything and make it shipshape, we will need to get rid of that suspense account by doing a credit entry and debiting purchases. Lastly, to correct everything and make it shipshape, we will need to get rid of that suspense account by doing a credit entry and debiting the purchases. It's done. This will give you 0.5 marks. Similarly, showing 50,000 as a deduction in here will earn you another 0.5 marks. Well, we are sitting pretty at the tippy top of the world right now, but at this stage you aren't going to get more than 8 marks. Very well done for your journey and hard work so far. Let's enjoy the fruits of our labor. Balance the suspense account. The balancing figure of 179 should be treated as an expense per the question. Balance the suspense account now. The balancing figure of 179 should be treated as an expense per the question. Balance the suspense account now. The balancing figure of 179 should be treated as an expense per the question. What are the chances of arriving at the correct figure in the exam? Probably 0, which may sound a bit depressing, but worry not. The silver lining to this rather depressing news is this, that as long as you show that wrong and incorrect number, balancing number, in the draft profit and loss account as an expense, you will get that 0.5 mark. Remember the steps and make sure to attempt a couple of past exam questions using this technique: correct, incorrect, and correction.